So there are actually quite a few V3 Deathadders available right now. I'm going to go over the newest one, the Deathadder V3 Hyperspeed, and compare it to the other two available right now, and kind of figure out who it's best for and why I personally like this mouse the most at the moment. So when it first came out, the Deathadder V3 Hyperspeed kind of came out of nowhere. No one was really expecting it to drop. Along with it just being kind of unexpected, the naming convention is also a little bit confusing. Unlike the Viper V3 Hyperspeed, this is not battery operated. There's no compartment down here for a replaceable battery. But the Deathadder V3 Hyperspeed is a smaller sized ergonomic mouse. It is not a one-to-one copy of the other versions of the Deathadder V3s. There are some very minor shape differences, as well as just being smaller. The hump is rounder on the Hyperspeed version, so it's not quite as drastic back here. And if you compare it to the full-sized Deathadder, it feels like the hump has a little bit more of a drastic fall off on the back here, whereas it just seems a little bit rounder, more spherical almost on the Hyperspeed version. Additionally, this has the soft touch coating here, so it's a little bit more similar to something like one of the endgame gear mice, though I would say that this is a lot more dry and rubbery in comparison, whereas the smooth touch on the Hyperspeed, as well as the wired version of the Deathadder V3, it's a lot more satin. I would say that in terms of like how it feels to the touch, this is much more pleasant, whereas something like, you know, the endgame gear coating is a lot more functional and more grippy. Both of them are significantly better, and I think most people will like more than the dry, kind of like chalky coating that was on the original Deathadder V3 Pros. Overall, the build feels great. There's no flexing or creaking anywhere. This is actually a very impressive build. Some people were having issues with the sides flexing a little bit on the wired versions. None at all on the Hyperspeed version. This is built excellently. The clicks on these are Razer's optical V3 switches, and they feel nice, light, no pre-travel, just a little bit of post-travel on these. They feel fantastic, very spammable. I think most people are going to have a good time with the switches here. Same with the side buttons, pretty much no pre-travel, touch of post-travel, very light, clicky. They have a nice, pleasant sound to them. In terms of the scroll wheel, I actually think that this is a step up, at least for me personally, because the steps are a little bit more well-defined here, whereas on the previous two versions, it's very, I guess you could say it's very smooth, but the steps are a little bit almost mushy, like less defined steps in general. It's also worth noting, not a huge deal, but some people might care, the scroll wheel is much larger on the Deathadder V3 wired as well as the Pro, whereas it's a little bit smaller and more inset inside of the mouse on the Hyperspeed version. So not a huge deal, but just something to consider. Additionally, we've got some real big skates here. Very smooth, very consistent. I think the move to larger skates is overall nicer in my opinion. The size on the other two versions are smaller, like not dots or anything like that, but I do like the skates on the Hyperspeed a little bit more. I just feel like it feels a little bit more consistent in terms of how it feels on a mouse pad. Now, technically, the sensor in the Hyperspeed is not as good as the sensor in the Pro as well as the wired versions. However, in real world application, I don't feel a difference, and I don't think anyone who's being honest with themselves is gonna notice a difference either. In practice, in game, you're going to be just as accurate with this mouse as you would be with either of these mice. The shape, weight, and the coating are going to be a bigger deal, as well as just the price for most people than this sensor. Like, the sensor shouldn't be a big reason why you pick one or the other between these mice. One thing to note is that this does come with a default 1000 hertz pulling rate, and that dongle's actually got a little storage space down there, which is very cool. I feel like more mice should have that. If you wanted to throw this in your bag and take it with your laptop somewhere, it makes it a lot more practical than one of these mice where the dongle really doesn't have any storage space. It's also worth noting that this is compatible with the 8000 hertz dongle from Razer as well. So if you're into really pushing those pulling rates up to the 4000, 8000 hertz and your computer can handle it, this can do that for you. Now the question is, which of these is right for you, for your use case, your priorities, all that fun jazz. Now, in terms of which of these mice I would suggest for different priorities, in terms of price, I mean, the best option is the wired version, because this one, you can get it anywhere from $45 to $80, depending on if it's on sale, that sort of thing. So this one gives you the max performance since it's got the cable, and it goes up to 8000 hertz polling with that maximum, like the 30K DPI optical sensor. So this is technically the go-to pick if you're just min-maxing and you don't care about anything else. You just want the max performance. The Pro is, I don't know. I don't know if I would recommend this to someone unless they just had really flippin' big hands and they really just wanted a real big mouse. This kind of blows the regular Pro out of the water in a lot of different ways. From the external testing that I've researched, it looks like this performs on par in terms of sensor performance as well as click latency with the Pro. So even though it's on paper a better sensor and all that fun jazz, in actual like real world practice, you're not going to notice a difference if you're using the Hyperspeed. There's also the fact of the coating. This is a much nicer coating, in my opinion. More people will like this coating over the chalky, grainy feel of the original V3 Pros. So that's also something to consider. And the price. I mean, the Pro, you can get it anywhere from $120 to $150. The Hyperspeed is $100 out of the gate. So it's cheaper, better coating, better build quality. Unless you've got really big hands and you're really dead set on getting the larger sized Deathadder, I mean, there's no reason not to get the Hyperspeed if you're looking for an ergonomic mouse, specifically a Deathadder. Now, it is worth mentioning, they do have a smooth touch version of the Deathadder V3 Pro, but you have to buy it with an 8K dongle. It comes bundled with it, whether you want to use it or not. And the price is much higher. It's $160. So in my opinion, it's not really worth it. You could get this and then buy the dongle and you'd be out like $120. It just doesn't make sense to buy that. Kind of rubs me the wrong way that Razer is kind of forcing you to get the smooth touch full-size version and forcing you to buy the dongle with it. It just feels like a cheap way to try and milk out a little bit more money. But yeah, the Deathadder V3 Hyperspeed, it's been a very pleasant surprise, and it has stayed on my desk pretty consistently ever since I got this mouse, along with the Deathadder. This is not a Deathadder. Along with the XM2 4K wireless. These two mice have really been on my desk very consistently. One thing that I think is worth mentioning with these mice is that they feel fantastically comfortable to use. And I think I put in my previous reviews that it's missing some extra buttons, so it's not as good for doing something like productivity, where you want to have a few extra shortcuts on your mouse. But Razer Synapse, you can do a hypershift. So what I do with mine is I have a profile dedicated to working in DaVinci for video editing, and I program the hypershift to the scroll wheel. So I'll click the scroll wheel, and then my right click and the two side buttons become extra functions on top of the default buttons that I customize myself. So it functionally gives you like 3 extra buttons on top of the buttons that are already there. So if you're looking for something that's good for productivity as well, you can definitely do that with these mice. And in fact, you could probably do it with the other mice as well, like the Viper V3. Anyway, that's it for this round. I really appreciate you guys being here. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions or if you want to add to the conversation, like if you have any experience with any of these mice and you just kind of want to share. I love to hear it. But anyway, take care, God bless, and I'll see you all on the next one, okay? Take it easy.